Ann Fogolin, welcome to the Star Coach Show.
Thank you, my friend. It's a pleasure to be here. How are you?
I am good. I have to tell you that I've been like, Ann's coming, Ann's coming, Ann's the interview. It's like, not the British is coming, but Ann's coming. I've been super excited because I know that we're both in alignment about what coaching can bring to the world, how important it is to give coaches the skills and tools they need so that they can partner with their clients. And let me tell everybody a little bit more about you so that they can understand why it was so important to me to introduce you to them. And then we're going to dive into these to some pretty awesome stuff. If those of you are listening are curious about what a coaching mindset brings to the conversation, what added that to the competencies back in 2019. Ann and I are going to explore that and so much more. So you want to stay with us. Ann is a master certified coach. She's been working with, and these are her words, and learning from and growing with her clients for nearly 20 years. She is like many of us, not like coaching is not her first rodeo. It's not the first thing she did. Many of us came from other walks of life, other professional focuses, and then thought, oh my gosh, coaching is where I need to be to continue to grow and expand. So she came from education and being a teacher into this field of coaching that lights so many of us up. But she hasn't given up educator because she and I are together at UTD in the executive coaching program. She's in some other schools. So that through line of education has continued, huh? It just is sort of tweaked on where you're offering that education. Another key thing, well, so Ann's business is Becuz I Matter, and Becuz is Becuz. So it's kind of fun. We're going to be giving you links to connect with Ann, so no worries about any of that. You're gonna be able to connect with her. Ann is an ICF coach assessor. And in my years of experience working with new coaches, working with coaches who are anywhere on their journey, that coach assessor is sort of like, ooh, what are those? Who are they? And what do they think? And what do they do? Sort of like, you know, she's going to bring that unique perspective. I have to admit, I was trained as one and thought, oh, I don't know that I can do that heavy lifting. And does that heavy lifting all the time and helps coaches be better at what they do. And so, as I mentioned, in 2019, the ICF updated the competencies. They had been the same competencies for decades, and a new competency was added, and that is embodies a coaching mindset. Ann and I, in doing our exploratory call, said there are so many things we could talk about, but what lights you up, Ann? And what lights Ann up is this whole concept of what's between our ears as a coach? How are we thinking? How are we engaging? How are we being? And that's the conversation that we're going to have today. So before we dive into that, I just want to remind all of you listening, wherever you're listening, be sure you subscribe, because subscribing means you never miss a moment of awesome guests like Ann Fogolin on the Star Coach Show. So want to be sure to do that. If you're watching us on YouTube, hello, good to see you. And be sure that you click on that subscribe button, because we do shorts, we do many things in addition to the interviews that go out on all the other platforms. Here at YouTube, you get even more tips, trips, and strategies. So be sure that you subscribe. Now, with all that business out of the way, let's dive into the fun that Ann and I are going to have. So, Ann, let's just start with the importance of the coach's mindset. How does that play a vital role in how we show up? And hopefully all of us are moving towards mastery. So what role does that play in mastery?
Well, first, let me say thank you for that intro. Excuse me. Wow. I want my family to listen to this. Maybe they'll think I'm pretty cool too when this is over. Who knows? Oh, goodness. Um, and it's interesting how you framed it in that this is a new competency. My belief is that it's always been there. It's been embedded in the competencies. What has been fantastic is that the group that worked on the competencies really understood how significant this is on its own, because this competency is really about us, how we do our work. It is the beingness of the person, the beingness of the coach, the beingness of the assessor. Yes, it's not always the most fun work to do, but it is what supports new coaches in moving into the profession. So, some of the things we love, some of the things we don't love so much, and we do them because it works. This competency is all about us. How is it that I am doing my work for me to be at my best every time I am with a client? And so, for me to be mindful of that, what do I include in my daily practice or in my weekly habits? However, it is that you put this together to support you in being your very best self. For me, it's like an extension of Covey's 7 habits. There's so many of those tenets that really speak to me. What am I going to do? How do I do my own work so that I am really providing value to my client? So that's the short answer.
Right. And I love the fact that you're pointing out it's not a new concept,
No.
but it was important enough to give its own line, right? Its own line item.
Yeah.
So, especially when we're new at something and we're trying to learn from what's laid out for us and what we're exploring, sometimes it needs to be that much more explicit for us to put the energy there because I talk to coaches day in and day out who are like, "Oh, there's so much and what do I do and how do I be?" And so it I've heard again and again how much having this be its own competency brings importance up on it or an additional focus on it. So in this period of time that you've been working with coaches a long time, how do you see coaches evolving over to we sort of have this path that we're all on, hopefully all working towards mastery.
Yeah. Well, with this particular competency, it is about that continuous development. So, as you mentioned, yes, I am a coach educator at Dallas, which I'm loving, as well as a couple of other training schools. I also mentor. I'm a coach supervisor, and I assess. And so, what's really important, I think, in the work that we do as we support developing coaches is to help them understand that regardless of where we are in our journey, I've been doing this over 20 years now, it is absolutely imperative that I continue to do my work. Because I have an MCC means nothing truly. When I got my MCC, it was almost as though now the learning really began. Because there's a level of expectation and there's a level of expertise that people are looking for, and to continue with that, it is that sharpening the saw. How do I do my own work so I am bringing my best coaching to my clients? So I work with a lot of leaders, and particularly it seems within communication. So it's often around the emotional intelligence piece that comes through. And it's funny how the niche found me, as I think many of us do experience. The niche finds us somehow. But to answer your question, it is about us as educators, as mentors, as supervisors, as assessors, to not lose sight of the fact that we need to be doing our own work. So we're leading by example. And this competency really speaks to that. If this competency is something that's really important, regardless of the level that you are applying for as far as credential, then we who are supporting you in achieving that need to also be mindful of what that competency is asking for. So, for me to engage in ongoing learning, for me, so I just finished a course out of the IOC on vertical leadership development,
Oh,
which
yeah,
was
we've had a couple shows about that.
fascinating work. And it all just makes so much sense. But there's so much, I think I probably have to go back and do it all over again. So I really assimilate the information. But when I mentioned that to a client, their response was like, really, another course? And it wasn't as though it was judgment, it was from disbelief of like, you're doing another one. And yes, I'm doing another one because it means there's so much to learn and grow from that I can now take and use with my clients. It's the whole thing around AI, for example. I know this much about AI, but I know that I'm using it in Array Notes platform, for example, with my mentoring clients, because it's just so easy for us to use. It's a beautiful tool for me to be able to use from a mentoring perspective. It makes so much sense. Has the video, tells you how much time people are speaking. So it's imperative that we do our own work. And this competency speaks to that. Not only does it speak to it, it requires us to be very mindful. I don't know if you can hear that. I will apologize. Can you hear the
No, you're the only one
arborist?
that can hear your
Okay.
people working on your trees. The rest of us are just hanging here with you, hanging on every word.
And they're hanging out there and we're in here. So this one is really about me doing my work, me developing that reflective practice. How do I work with my own mentor coach to make sure? And that too blows people away. Why are you've got an MCC? Yes. And I need to be working with a coach. In fact, that's one of the most interesting things when I get hired, when I'm being interviewed to be hired, and people don't always know the questions to ask. And I will share with them, here's one of the questions you might want to ask, because I want you to do as much interviewing as possible before you decide. Ask the coach you're interviewing if they work with a coach. And if their answer is no, I'd ask why. It's like a doctor not going to a doctor, or a dentist
Right.
not going to a dentist, or a lawyer not having a lawyer. Why would a coach not have a coach? Now, you may not need the frequency
Right.
when you first started, but oh my goodness, yes. I hope to finally meet my coach, who I have met virtually 20 years ago. But I'd love to I know he won't go away. He just won't go away.
But you've never met him in person.
No, I met my mentor coach, my skills mentor coach, in 2019 when we were putting the PCC markers together, and that was amazing because she's incredible. But I reach out to her when I feel like, I feel like my skills, something's going on here. And so for me to reach out, to send a recording, have her look at it, listen to it, review it, and tell me, it's not as bad as you think, or what is going on? Like, you're slipping here. And so it's, but that's reality, you know.
Right, right. We're all human beings.
Right.
And so we are different day to day, depending upon what's going on.
True.
So one of the things that I've noticed when I've worked with coaches, love your feedback on this, is the very first sort of bullet point under embodies the coaching mindset, that we honor the fact that our clients are responsible for making their own decisions. So that's a paraphrase, but um, what kind of I don't know if struggle is the right word, but what kind of impact do you see that having on the coaches that you work with?
That's such a great question, Meg. And especially, I think, with the quality of human that the coaching profession invites into it. And, as we were speaking, this cohort that we've just started, oh my goodness, like, oh my goodness. Whoa. You just love who's in this. They come in with this desire to quote unquote help. And I have a bit of an issue with that word, which a bias, maybe not an issue. because they come from such experience, and many of them have been consulting or mentoring or both. And they come from the place where they've been the go-to person. Meg, where do I go? Meg, what do I do? Meg, how do I do this? And Meg, because she's been the go-to, now is very accustomed to giving those answers.
Right. And
Meg,
feel like I'm doing a disservice if I'm not giving those answers.
100%. Well, yes, because you are acknowledged for, you are validated for, you are expected to, you are rewarded for being that go-to that has the answers. It could be the name on the door, it could be the corner office, it could be the team's success, however success is defined, and you are really foundational in all of that. Now we're going to take all of that and ask you to do the exact opposite. And when you've become so successful in your profession of 10, 15, 20, 30, 45 years, and say, okay, now instead of telling, we want you to ask. Instead of directing, we want you to be partnering with the client. Instead of being a fixer or someone who is going to take care of, we want you to hold them accountable. Oh my goodness, that is a huge mindset shift. The leaders and the managers, however, that really can wrap their head around this concept sooner rather than later in their development, in their organizations, will have a much easier time of this transformation. So, if we can get our hands on the youngins, maybe a little bit easier. But it is to hold the individual as being complete, whole, resourceful, capable. There's nothing wrong with the person. There's nothing broken. They don't need to be fixed. But there's an expectation. So this is a double-edged sword, because we have the expectation from an organization and the hierarchy that is there. What do you need? Who do you go to? I go to Meg. Meg will tell me what to do. Well, now when Meg has more of a coach approach, even if she's not coaching, to have more of a coach approach, to engage me in conversation. Well, Ann, what do you think? Ann's not accustomed to having her manager, leader, supervisor ask questions. Ann's used to just being told. And now she has an opportunity to share an idea. And that can become very uncomfortable for Ann, because it's never been asked of. But Ann's really been chomping at the bit to offer an idea or two, because it could make a difference in how things work out. So there's a shift in how Meg is going to manage or lead. There's a shift in how the employee or Ann is going to now come to Meg, because Meg is demonstrating there's an expectation I have of you. And that is, when you see something, I want you to think of a possible solution. And then I want you to think of what would be the best of the solutions that you come up with. So now there's a fair amount more responsibility and accountability on the part of the employee. But what we have found, and what the statistics prove, is that the more I feel like I am part of what's happening, that I have a voice in what's happening, that I am engaged in what's happening, the greater the likelihood that your team, this organization is going to be successful. And often in organizations and in corporations, success means finances, although it has way more to it. But it also really impacts retention in an organization, the quiet quitting that we're all hearing about, the level of engagement. Should there need to be something around wages, people are much more open to, I will take a wage freeze for this year, because we know collectively we are going to benefit come next year or next quarter or whatever it might be. So this is a double-edged sword, but it's the mindset shift of the leader, of the manager, to say, I don't need to go in and fix. You are most capable. And when you empower me, when you give me opportunity and I step into that, it's scary for me and it's exhilarating for me, because what you're doing is you're developing leadership within your organization. Wow, aren't you sorry you asked that
No, I'm not sorry. I love because I've seen that happen in organization after organization
Yeah.
that I've been honored enough to go in and help them bring in more of a coaching culture. So let's shift that just a little bit back to those coaches that we were just talking about that are learning this new skill and they want to bring value. They want to bring value so badly that they are, but what if I know better than my client is basically what the mindset might be at the very beginning when embracing this new skill set, this new process of coaching versus mentoring or consulting or leading. So what would you say to a new coach who is all wrapped around that? What do you mean that they're ultimately responsible for their own choices? What if they're not going to get value out of the coaching then?
Well, even with I want to be sure that I language this well, Meg.
Hmm.
Even with the most well-intentioned and perhaps least skilled coach, the client is still going to gain value from that. The skills that we bring to a coaching relationship are first and foremost a space for someone to do the work. Well, but that in and of itself is a challenge too, because people think they know what coaching is. Oh yeah, I've been coached, but have they really? Because that
Right.
word's been thrown around so loosely. Excuse me. Um, and it's to have the individual understand, okay, so what is the value? What is my value add? My value add is a safe space. And now with more of the positive psychology slant to this, they're moving closer to using the language of brave space so that the client feels willing to be open and vulnerable and honest and transparent. It is to be in partnership, which is very different from all of the other modalities, because consulting is hierarchical, mentoring is hierarchical, assessing is hierarchical, supervising is hierarchical, coaching is partnership. It's an even playing field. That is unnerving to some, but it is this partnership of, I trust you have whatever it takes in order to move closer to what you want or gaining what you desire most. And what I would do and how I would do doesn't mean it's right for you. That's probably one of the hardest things for us to wrap our head around as new
Yeah.
coaches. And actually, the advice trap, Michael Bungay Stanier talks about that in the advice trap, right? We want to get in there because, oh, I can't bear to see you hurt. But what we don't understand is sometimes when people fall down, that's the greatest way for them to learn to pick themselves back up. So when we come from a place of, oh, but I don't want you to hurt yourself, that's how they'll learn. So I'll use for an example, when we have children, and I'm only 28 with 3 kids older than me now, and
I don't
5
know how that
people.
happens, but life is just
It's
mysterious
a
that
magic
way.
wand.
Yes.
And I have a granddaughter who's going to be 5 months tomorrow, God bless her. But I remember when my kids were little and they were starting to climb on the furniture. And we had a coffee table with a glass top on it. And it was most concerning that they would fall and hit their head on the glass. And it's not so that I would want to stop them from falling, because I mean, obviously, if they're going to endanger themselves, you're not going to allow that. But I used to put my hand on the corner of the glass because that could have huge impact. And they would fall down and decide if they were going to cry. And they still have a diaper on. They're not going to hurt themselves really badly. There's carpeting on the floor, so I'm giving all of the cushions that go along with that. But if I didn't react, oh my goodness, let me fix that, chances were there might be a quick cry and then they'd roll over and they'd crawl up on the furniture again. And so it's the same kind of thing if we were to take that and translate that as we work with our clients or as new coaches work with our clients. You don't need to rush in and save them. They don't need to be saved. What they need is a safe place to figure that out. And one of the things actually that helped Meg, Barbara Colorasso, when my kids were little, parenting, and she talked about an example of her daughter had made a birthday cake for the grandparents. And as they are getting ready, the granddaughter drops the cake in the kitchen. And of course, it's going to be icing down.
Of course.
And instead of her rushing in to try and fix it, she stood in the kitchen and empathized and went, "Oh, man, that sucks." And the kid's in tears. And it was about how she actually coached her daughter through that. So, what do you want to do? How do you think we can fix that? What do you need? How can I support you? But she held her daughter responsible, held her daughter accountable. And so the daughter was able to do whatever, and then had a bit of a tale to tell her grandparents to say, "It looked really pretty when we were ready to leave the house. I hope it still tastes good." And any grandparent's going to say, "It looks gorgeous and it tastes even better."
Taste, and I'm so touched that you made it for me. And
Exactly. Exactly. So it's the same kind of mentality with leaders and managers. It's going to hurt at the beginning, but it's not going to be um, something that is so, I shouldn't generalize. Most of the time, it is not going to be a catastrophic something. If you see them doing something that is really life altering, in a negative way, of course. And as leaders and managers, sometimes it's more of a coach approach you have versus coaching, because coach approach means that there is a time, there is a place where we can tell. But if we've been more coach like from the beginning and it's not happening, they are not understanding, whatever, and then we can have a little bit of sharing of information, and then we go right back to coaching.
So, so good. And such a beautiful segue into the next question I wanted to ask, which is about our transformation as coaches. Like, what does having a coaching mindset and attending to that coaching mindset, what does that do for our own transformation?
Well, what doesn't it do? Is there really a place in your life? Because that coaching mindset, for me, that competency is not just me as a coach. That is me as a being, as a human being. So where in my life could I not benefit by continuing to learn and grow, by developing some kind of reflective practice? And that could be anything. What are the habits that we choose to include in our life? It could be through my coaching. It could be through the mentoring process. It could be whatever. It talks about being open to the influence of context and culture and the way the profession has grown. We have the incredible privilege and opportunity to work with people from around the world. It's amazing. What am I meant to learn from someone who's on the other side of the globe that I've never been to and may not get to, but now I have exposure to? What am I meant to learn from you? What does it do to challenge my biases? How is it challenging my assumptions? Um, cultural components to it, the whole, oh my goodness, identity component and how people identify and what is it that I'm triggered by. The self-regulation of emotion. How do I prepare for a session? Well, how do I prepare for a session? How do I prepare for a really important conversation? How, as a leader, do I prepare to provide feedback? How am I mindful of who's receiving what I'm about to offer? How do I make sure that I'm in a good headspace so that I can be present? So, to your question, Meg, where doesn't this fit? Where doesn't it apply? Is kind of where I'm going. How about you?
Love
What do you
that.
think of this? It was a great question.
No, I agree 100%. I believe that it's not a one and done kind of thing, right? So our learning, our mindset, as we mentioned earlier, can be impacted daily depending upon what's happened to us or how we have, what kind of day we've had, what kind of an experience we've had. So just knowing that these habits and practices that we can be mindful of about our mindfulness are ongoing things. What works well? Does journaling work well? Do you want to, what can you experiment with? I mean, just like things to really be thinking about. Somebody is trusting you with their journey as the coach partner. So taking care of what's here and what's showing up is our responsibility. And
Yes.
and the more we become aware of what's happening here, it has to be transformational. Because transformation in my mind begins with awareness. And the more I can be aware of what's bubbling up or what works better for me or what practices tend to impact my being as a coach, I'm
Yes.
just going to transform more and lean into that more, and then it's just so exciting.
I totally agree with what you've offered. It is so important. This competency is an invitation, and not just an invitation for me. I take it even further. It's a requirement for me to do my work. And even with that competency, the last bullet is about us seeking our own support system. And I'm very open with my clients, with my mentoring students, with the students in class. What does that mean for you? For me, it could be a therapist. And I'm hoping that, offering that helps to destigmatize. I know you've done your 20 plus years of therapy. People who go to a therapist, it doesn't mean something's wrong. It means that they are aware of something isn't working the way that they want. And so who do I go to? So I have a therapist, I have a coach, I have my mentor skills coach, I have friends I can speak to. But all of those are very different from having a safe space. So when I speak to my coach, for example, I know that as much as he's become a very dear friend, when I'm asking for coaching time, he comes in very neutral, very objective. It's just that he knows me so well now, he can challenge me on stuff that I might offer. Not to make me wrong, but to really challenge me like, are you playing big enough here?
Mhm.
It really sounds like a cop out. And that is because that trust and safety competency is so solid between the two of us. He can pretty much say anything and I can respond in any way. But what I mean is, who is the cadre that we go to when we need our
Mhm.
support system? And that's really critical. And I know too that culturally that doesn't always fit. Um, I have had the opportunity to work with a group from Japan, which was just an incredible opportunity, really, really eye-opening and enlightening. And what was shared was sharing that you go to a therapist is not something that people would see as a positive within the Japanese culture. I didn't know that. That's tremendous learning for me to have. I can
Mhm.
share that openly, but what's the impact now if I'm working with someone from a culture that sees it as being something other than positive? So it's tremendous learning for me on top of that as well.
So good. One of the things that came up for me as you were talking about the stigma attached to therapy and completely understanding that, as you know, I was a therapist for over 20 years. And I remember being asked once by somebody, I don't even remember who asked me. I think their adult child was getting into a relationship with somebody who freely discussed the fact that they had had a therapist. And this person said to me, if you were me, would you be concerned that your child is getting involved with somebody who has had a therapist? And I said, somebody who has been to a therapist has had the opportunity to work through some of those things that run deep, that run under the radar. They've been brought up, they've been looked at, they've been explored. I would much rather have my child involved in a relationship with somebody who has dealt with those things than somebody who has all those deep waters running and that have never been addressed. So, just sort of a little side note from what you said, because it takes awareness and courage to say, hey, who's out there? What are support systems that are out there that can
Yes.
help me be the best that I can be? So,
And it's required of us, it's in our code of ethics Code of ethics has 4 different main sections in there, but one of them is about me doing my own work, me being responsible for how I show up. And so it's just an extension. This is really a beautiful extension of what I am ethically required to provide for my clients.
So good. And I could talk to you forever about this. Unfortunately, I know you have other things to do than be just on the Star Coach
And
show.
you too?
Well, let me ask you this as we wrap up our discussion around embodies a coaching mindset, anything that's dangling for you that you want to like either double click on or just reinforce as we're wrapping up?
I guess bottom line, Meg, is the invitation, the requirement to do your own work in order for you to be your best, whatever that means, whatever that looks like. There are no shoulds to this. There are no I ought to. How do you take care of yourself? What is your self-care routine or habits? Journaling, you said journaling doesn't work for me. Meditation, sitting, it doesn't work for me. That's not how I operate. But if I do go out and I do walk my dog, that's meditative for me. So you figure out what works for you to continually sharpen the saw to be your very best, that you're 1% better today than you were yesterday. And that is going to translate into the quality of coaching that you provide your clients.
Mic drop. So with that, how can people connect with you?
Sure. So the email is Ann Fogolin at becauseImatter.com. So it's ANNFOGOLIN at BECUZIMATTER.com. Here in Canada, we say Z. And the website is www.becauseImatter.com, and because is BECUZ, imatter.com.
And we will have links for that. So if you're like, oh, I couldn't keep up with that, it's okay. If you're watching us on YouTube, grab those links right below this video. If you're listening, just go to the Star Coach Show and grab the links for this episode. Will be in the show notes along with all sorts of information about Ann and the wonderful things that she does. And thank you so much for joining us. It has been delightful to have you on the show.
Truly, truly my pleasure, Meg. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Absolutely. And for all of you, thank you again for joining the Star Coach Show. Remember that each and every week we bring strategies, tools, and resources to help you be the best coach you can be, the best leader you can be. And really, as a whole, remember that we're all here on this earth together to do the heavy lifting together. So be kind to yourself, be kind to others. And until next week, this is Meg Rentschler wishing you the very best for your success. Bye bye.